StarCraft pros are famous for their speed, with upwards of 400 actions per minute of precise inputs in the heat of a battle. A lot of it comes down to practice, but all the practice in the world won't help you if you don't have the right fundamentals. Hi, I am Hotkeys and I'm gonna teach you how to play StarCraft 2. In this video, I'll show you how to use hotkeys to control the game like the pros. A hotkey is a keyboard shortcut that performs a certain action in the game. This video will explain how hotkeys work and how they help you win games. I'll teach you the most important hotkey you'll ever use. I'll talk about the most controversial hotkey in the game, and I'll show you how to master the game's camera. If you stick around for the very end of the video, I'll also demonstrate just how big a difference the efficient use of hotkeys can make in an actual battle. Spoiler alert, it's a big deal. If you're not already using hotkeys, start today. Most actions in StarCraft 2 can be performed with the mouse, but when given the choice, you'll want to use the keyboard instead. No matter how fast you are with a mouse, moving the cursor to click an icon on the screen is always going to be significantly slower than hitting a key on the keyboard. Let me demonstrate just how big a difference hotkeys make. If you've seen my macro tutorial, you'll know that regularly cycling through your production structures to keep up on unit production is one of the most fundamental tasks in the game. Here I have 3 command centers, 2 barracks, 2 factories and 2 starports. Right now, none of these structures are producing anything. I want to fix that. Using only my mouse, I'm going to select these structures and start unit production in each one. In total, these actions took me about 12 seconds to complete. Not too great considering I'll have to do this roughly every 15 seconds of the game. Now I'm gonna do the same thing using hotkeys. And just to keep things interesting, I'll be doing all of this while on the opposite side of the map, moving my Reaper in a circle around the opponent's Zealot. This time, the same cycle took me only about 6 seconds, and that's while keeping my Reaper alive. Committing to using hotkeys is the single most important thing you can do to improve your performance in StarCraft 2. And it all starts with the fundamental function of being a military commander, giving orders. A command hotkey is a keyboard shortcut that issues a specific order to the selected units or structures when you press it. Each unit or structure has its own unique command hotkeys for each of the special actions they can take. For example, the T hotkey tells a High Templar to cast Psionic Storm, and the A hotkey orders a barracks to train a Marine. There are way too many unit-specific command hotkeys to list in a single video. Instead, I want to teach you a basic principle that will make memorizing the game's many hotkeys as easy as pie. Anytime you can't remember the hotkey for a certain command, do not click the icon with your mouse. Instead, hover the mouse over the icon, read the hotkey, and then press the right key on the keyboard. Stick to this rule and you'll know all of the hotkeys by heart before you know it. There's also general command hotkeys, which are the same for all units and structures. These include things like P for patrol and H for hold position. There is one command hotkey that is more important than any other. This is the single most common and devastating mistake that new players often make in StarCraft 2. And if you're not already using the hotkey correctly, I can guarantee that you're losing games you should have won. The attack hotkey. A orders the selected units to attack. An attack can target an enemy unit or structure, but the attack command has a far more useful application. When you move your army by clicking the right mouse button on the map, you're actually issuing a move command. And units on a move command will ignore enemy units until they reach their destination, even if they're attacked. By hitting A and then clicking the left mouse button somewhere on the map, you'll order the selected units to move towards that location while attacking any enemy units they encounter along the way. This is called attack moving, or A move for short, and you should be using this technique pretty much anytime you want to move your army. StarCraft 2 is a fast-paced game, and running into the opponent's army while your units are on a move command can be game-ending. There is one important thing to keep in mind when using attack move. Make sure you click the ground, not an enemy unit. Accidentally targeting a specific unit in the opponent's army will order your units to focus fire that unit, and that can be really bad. Use the minimap. If you hit A and then left click a location on the minimap, you'll order your units to attack move to that location. And you don't have to worry about accidentally targeting units or structures. Attack commands given through the minimap will always target the ground. If you want to know more about how to use the general command hotkeys, check out my guide on unit control. It's an old video, but the information is just as relevant today. Now that you know how important command hotkeys can be, you want to use them as much as possible. But to do that, there's something you need to figure out first: how to quickly select the right units. Depending on the state of the game, you might have dozens of units spread all over the map. How do you keep track of what's where? And how do you quickly select the right units? Let's talk about the most controversial hotkey in StarCraft. You might have already seen people talking about it, and you're almost certainly using it. Select army units. Hitting the F2 key will select every army unit you have on the map, regardless of their location. It's not that the F2 key is bad. It's the fastest way to respond to a crisis, and it can be very useful when moving reinforcements to the front or looking for missing units. But relying too much on F2 builds bad habits. Put simply, select army units is a very blunt instrument. It doesn't care that you have a Zergling posted at each of the opponent's expansion sites. It doesn't care that you have an observer tracking your opponent's rally point. And it certainly couldn't care less that you have a medevac about to drop your opponent's main. F2 will select all of those units, and when you order that army to move, they'll all move. When you're first learning the game, it's totally fine to select your whole army and attack move the opponent's side of the map. But one of the key skills you'll need to learn to improve at StarCraft 2 is precise unit control. Things like splitting your army to attack from two sides, dropping the opponent's base while attacking their front, or harassing enemy workers while defending your own base. And we haven't even talked about microing spellcasters in battle. These things might all sound very advanced to you right now, but it's never too early to start learning good fundamentals. And when it comes to unit control, good fundamentals means one thing: control groups. A control group is a selection of units or structures that's been saved to a number key on the top row of the keyboard, letting you quickly select those units by hitting the number. To create a control group, hold Control and press any of the number keys. From now on, hitting that number key will select those units wherever they are. If you create a new control group using the same number, the old control group will be replaced. If you want to add units to an existing control group without replacing it, select the units you want to add to the group, then hold Shift and hit the number key. Units can belong to more than one control group at the same time. This is useful, but what if you want to split one large control group into two smaller control groups? To do this, hold Alt and hit a number key. This creates a new control group that includes your current selection, while also removing those units from any other control groups they were part of. Very useful. There are tons of ways to use control group hotkeys, and the better you know them, the more cool stuff you can pull off in a pinch. The best way to learn how to use control groups is to experiment. Still, I'd like to give you just a taste of what's possible. Here I hit F2 to select my whole army. I then hold Control and hit 1 to create a new control group including all of those units. Now I hit Tab until I can see my Banshees. I then hold Control and click one of the Banshees to exclude all other types of units. Then I hold Alt and hit 2 to create a second control group for the Banshees, while removing them from the first group. I now have one control group for my main army and another one for my Banshees, and it took me like 3 seconds to do. Now that you know how control groups work, you're probably wondering how you should use them. As you might already know from my macro tutorial, I recommend putting your town halls on the number 4 control group, and your production facilities on 5, 6, and 7. It's really a matter of personal preference though, and many players prefer to put town halls on 5. That said, you'll want to reserve at least 3 control groups for different army units. Also, 8, 9, and 0 are too far away to reach comfortably, so most people don't use them. The most important thing is to pick a system and stick with it. Always use the same number for the same thing and you'll eventually build muscle memory. Splitting your army into different control groups is a crucial part of mastering army control in StarCraft 2. There are many ways to do this, and it often depends on the state of the game and your unit composition. As a first step in learning how to use control groups, I suggest you add your scouting unit to control group 1. Then switch back and forth between your scout and your production facilities to practice your multitasking abilities during the early game. In a future video, I'll go into a lot more detail about how to split your army into control groups and how to control them effectively in battle. Controlling units is all well and good, but there's another aspect of the game that's even more important to master. This is something many new players really struggle with: controlling the camera. In StarCraft 2, looking away from the action at the wrong moment can literally cost you the game. But StarCraft maps are also really big, so you cannot be everywhere at once. That's why it's so important that you learn how to control the in-game camera efficiently. When controlling the camera, there are two things you need: precision and speed. You want to be able to center the game's camera on the most relevant location at any given time, and you want to spend as little time as possible adjusting the camera. There are many ways to control the game's camera. First, there's camera scrolling, which can be done in 3 different ways. Keyboard scroll means using the arrow keys on the keyboard. This method is precise, but it's not the best idea. To use this method, you'll have to move your hand far from its natural resting position over the more commonly used hotkeys, which will slow you down. A better option is to use mouse scroll. By pushing the mouse cursor against the edge of the screen, you'll scroll the camera in that direction. This keeps your fingers where they belong. The third method is called drag scroll. By clicking and holding the middle mouse button, you can drag the camera in any direction while you're holding down the button. Experiment with mouse scroll and drag scroll to see which one works best for you. For all camera scrolling options, you can set the scroll speed in the game options. I recommend starting somewhere around 30 to 50% and then finding the right balance for you. Another way to move the camera is through control groups. By double tapping the number key, such as 1, you'll center the game camera on the unit group's current location. And really, unless there's something else you need to do, you should be watching your main army at all times. Next, there's the jump to last alert hotkey. Pressing spacebar will center the camera on the location of the latest notification. Things like "you're under attack" or "research complete." This would be useful, except that it's so unreliable. The game is constantly bombarding you with all sorts of alerts, so there's no telling where you'll end up. A more reliable option is the base camera hotkey. Hitting the backspace key will cycle the game's camera between all of your town halls. Keep in mind though that it only works on completed town halls. But the most reliable method for centering the game's camera on a specific location is the one I saved for last. This is something even many longtime players don't know about: location hotkeys. Location hotkeys work a bit like control groups. They let you save a specific location on the map so that you can center the game's camera on that location with a simple press of a key. To save a location hotkey, position the camera at the spot you want to save, then hold Ctrl and hit F5. Now, whenever you hit F5, you'll jump right back to that location. You can do the same with F6, F7, and F8 for a total of 4 different locations. Location hotkeys are amazing. Pretty much every professional StarCraft 2 player uses them, and so should you. But what should you use them for? My recommendation is to use your location hotkeys for your bases. At the start of the game, when things are still slow, take the time to set up location hotkeys for your main base, your natural expansion, and the 3rd and 4th bases you're planning to take. You can now quickly and reliably hop to any of your bases at the press of a button, and I don't think I need to tell you how powerful that is. So what camera hotkeys should you use? To maximize your efficiency, you should apply the following priority. First, use a location hotkey or double tap a control group. Second, click the minimap at the relevant location. Third, use mouse scroll or drag scroll to move the camera short distances. You should only scroll the camera if it would be faster and more reliable than the alternative. Usually this means scrolling back and forth in the middle of a fight, when scouting the opponent's base, or when moving around your own base. Before we move on, I want to teach you a cool little trick. You can zoom the camera in and out by using the mouse wheel or the end key. This is mostly useless, but it has one very specific application. By zooming the camera in and out, you can reveal the presence of cloaked units, such as an observer. Cool, right? At this point, you might have some concerns about some of the hotkeys we've talked about. Frankly, some of them can be pretty hard to reach, which leads us to our next topic, customizing your hotkeys. First, the absolute basics. You need a mouse and a keyboard to play StarCraft 2 effectively. If you're using a laptop, get a USB mouse and a USB keyboard. It doesn't really matter which mouse or keyboard you use as long as they're comfortable for you, but I'll leave some suggestions in the description below. If for some reason you only have the use of one hand, then you should get the gaming mouse with a bunch of extra buttons that you can use for the most important hotkeys. You'll find the hotkey settings under Options and Hotkeys. The default hotkey setup is called Standard, and unless you change something already, this is what you got. Standard is not bad at all. The game's designers really put a lot of thought into making the setup as efficient as possible. Most of the hotkeys are clustered around the left side of the keyboard, where a right-handed person's hand would naturally rest. That's why the hotkey for Probe is E and not P, and the hotkey for Marine is A instead of M. They also did their best to reduce the total number of hotkeys in use. Many spells and abilities use T, C, F, and G, for example. And Terran units that transform all use E and D to activate the different modes. But Standard is only one of the game's predefined hotkey setups. Standard for lefties is basically a reversed version of the same setup that clusters the hotkeys on the right side of the keyboard instead of the left, making it a bit less awkward for left-handed players. Grid is an alternate setup that maps the commands in each unit's command card to a corresponding grid of keys on the keyboard. So for example, the location of the High Templar's Psionic Storm command matches the location of the X key on the keyboard, and the attack command matches the T key. There's also a grid for lefties that mirrors the same setup on the right side of the keyboard. Classic is based on the hotkey setup from the original StarCraft and Brood War. It's terrible and you shouldn't use it. Standard and Grid are equally viable at all levels of play. But as you get more experience with the game, you'll probably find yourself wanting to make some tweaks to default hotkeys. For the standard setup, hotkeys are divided into a section for each of the 3 races, plus a list of global hotkeys. Grid obviously uses the same setup for all 3 races. To edit a hotkey, select the command from the list, click the current hotkey or the Add Alternate button, and then hit the desired key or combination of keys you want to associate with the command. Modifying a hotkey will create a new hotkey profile if you haven't already saved one. Hotkey profiles are tied to your account and stored on the game servers, so they're available no matter which computer you log on from, although I've heard this feature isn't 100%. If you mess something up and unbind a hotkey you didn't mean to unbind, there's a section called Unbound where you can survey the damage and fix your mistakes. If you really screw up, just hit Restore Defaults in the top right to start over. If you feel like tinkering with your hotkeys, I have some recommendations. Despite the best efforts of the game's designers, there are a couple of important functions that have really unfortunate default hotkeys, and most players eventually end up changing these. First, I recommend changing the base camera hotkey from backspace to spacebar. Backspace is really awkward to hit without moving your whole hand from its natural resting position, and spacebar is normally bound to jump to last alert, which you should not rely on. Secondly, I recommend changing the location hotkeys to F1 through F4. You'll be giving up the idle worker and select army hotkeys, so you'll have to reassign them to other keys. I suggest putting select army units on the tilde key, which is the key to the left of the number 1. This key is usually assigned to show your life bars, which isn't a very important feature. Experiment and see what works for you. The perfect hotkey setup is the one that allows you to be efficient and comfortable. You should be able to reach every hotkey using one hand without moving that hand from its natural resting position. That said, there is something even more important than having perfect control: your health. Our bodies aren't designed for the kind of rapid, precise movements required to play a competitive video game. Over time, that stress adds up and can cause long-term injuries like carpal tunnel syndrome, tennis elbow, and back pain. These health issues have zero chill, so take care of yourself. Practice good posture, invest in a good chair, take breaks between games, and do hand and wrist exercises frequently. I'll link a video in the description to give you an example of some stretches you might want to try. Earlier in the video, I said I would show you how much of a difference using hotkeys effectively can make in a fight. But first, I just want to say if you found this video valuable, I'd be super grateful if you could hit the like button and leave a quick comment, as it really helps the video reach more people. Thank you. In this example, I'll be controlling a Terran army of Marines, Marauders, and Ghosts against a Protoss ball of Zealots, Stalkers, and Immortals. On the left side of the screen, I'm using only my mouse to control my army. On the right side of the screen, I'll be taking full advantage of hotkeys to try to win this engagement. Let's see how it goes. I have a lot more content planned for StarCraft, but I also make videos about game design and retrospectives of games like Final Fantasy and more. If you want to help a tiny channel grow, consider subscribing. Subscribing is totally free and it's the best way to support what I do. Thank you so much for watching and have a fantastic day.